Hey guys, it's Rodney, and for today's plant rant, we are ranting about the Jade Gollum or Gollum Jade. The Gollum Jades are a really cool and unique plant, kind of characterized by their almost Shrek ear-like foliage here, where we've got a little bit of an opening at the top of each of the leaves, and a little bit of kind of an orange rust color if they do get enough light. Now, jades are on the cacti and succulent side of the family when it comes to plants, meaning they are going to hold a lot of water in their foliage, which is actually really helpful and makes them a little bit easier to maintain. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about soil. So for the soil in this one, I've used the clay pebbles, which are just some small, very porous, help with airflow and water absorption, and I've mixed that into the soil on the bottom third of this pot here to ensure we've got really good drainage. For the rest of our soil, we're going to see our standard amendments. We've used perlite and expanded shale, as well as the cocoa coir, just to help retain just a small amount of moisture every time we water. Jades aren't really known for a super large or immense root structure, so we don't want to have too much soil in here that could stay soggy or wet and cause us root rot issues. The Gollum Jade is going to be a slower grower like most jades, but it is going to kind of grow in more of an upright shrub-like habit, but it is nice and slow, which makes it really easy to maintain. Because the jade is in that cactus and succulent side, we are going to want to make sure that it's getting ample light. It can even really handle about 4 to 5 hours of direct or full sun in our area here in Central Texas. If you are a little further north in the country, you are definitely going to want as much sun as possible, somewhere around 5 to 7 hours of direct sunlight. Now, some direct sun can definitely cause burn. Because the jade does hold a lot of its moisture in its foliage, it's a little bit easier to burn those cells. So you do want to be cautious or keep an eye out for that. As an example here, on this foliage, you can see a little bit of kind of a sunburn effect right here close up. When you do notice a little bit of sunburn this time of year, like the summertime when our sun's a little bit more intense, just bring it to an area with a little bit more shade or just a brighter, more indirect light, such as a tree canopy or a covering like this on a patio. Now, you can grow jades indoors. You're going to want to make sure that you've got a lot of light though, so it can be a little bit tricky. Also, bringing them indoors, you really want to balance that soil moisture like we've talked about with some of our other tropicals. Because the jade's on the cacti and succulent side, you really want to make sure that the soil dries out thoroughly before watering again. The jade is also a really slow grower, which means it's also going to be slow to communicate to tell us when we've maybe overwatered or underwatered. Underwatering on a jade is a little easier to notice because on the foliage, where it holds all of its water, it's going to start to look wrinkly like a really wet fingertip. And that's going to be a really good sign that it's time to water. Overwatering can be a little bit more tricky. Though the foliage is still going to turn yellow to let us know, sometimes it's a little too late because the jade is a slow grower. So things that I commonly look for is the soil staying too moist for too long. Once I water, I make sure that the soil is able to dry out within a 2 to 3 day period. So let's talk a little bit about fertilizing and feeding for a cactus or succulent. The jade is really not going to have a whole lot of needs in that way. But just like any cacti and succulent, you really should focus on something that's going to help strengthen the roots and feed the root system. There's products like liquid root stimulators that work really well for your cacti and succulents. Liquid seaweed is, of course, another great one. I also like Microlife's liquid humates. It's basically like a liquid compost, really. But what we're trying to do is establish a really healthy and deep-rooted root system for the plant. That's going to keep the foliage on top nice and healthy, strong, and of course stable. Let's talk propagating jades. Jades, just like most succulents, are relatively easy to propagate. The one downfall with the jade and propagation, though, is that they are slow growers, so they can be slow to develop some roots, so do be patient. I would look for a branch or a stem like this guy here off of this main trunk, where I could cut this guy really close to that main stem, and then I'd take this plant here to be able to root it. Now, there's a couple of different ways you could root a jade. You can do a water propagation, but again, because jades are slow growing and they are slow to establish roots, it can be a little difficult and you can cause some rot on the stem here while you're waiting on those roots to develop. What makes propagating a jade really easy is using this stem and dipping it in something like a root hormone or a cutting powder, and then propagating it in a nice, superfine, sterile soil mix. Now, jades, like most cacti and succulents, really don't need a whole lot of soil space. It's really what makes them so low maintenance. So in a case like this particular Gollum jade, when we started, was actually in a 6-inch container, and it's gone into this 8-inch guy. Now, that's the biggest pot I would do, but it is shallow, so that's why I chose this particular pot. A standard pot is typically 8 inches by 8 inches, and in that case, you can cause a lot of root rot issues with that soggy soil, because you just end up with too much soil space. It's really best to look for something relatively shallow and or wide in this example. We're only about 4 to 6 inches in height and about 8 inches in width. We want to prevent any excess soil from holding on to moisture and rotting out our plant. Most cacti and succulents, specifically the jades and things like echeverias or ghost plants, you really can go from the 6-inch grow pot right into a 6-inch pot, like a terracotta pot, something that's going to breathe really well. You really don't need to up pot too much larger, but general rule of thumb, I would at least look for something 1/2 inch larger on either side. So a 6-inch going into something like a 7-inch container. If you're ready to try your hand at something new, such as a succulent or specifically the jade family, check out miltonsplants.com. That's MILTONS plants.com to check out the wide variety of jades available there. The Gollum jade is just one of hundreds of different jade varieties, but they are really cool, great little addition to a patio or balcony garden because they really don't require a whole lot of space, and honestly, they're just kind of fun. If you guys are enjoying this content, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that little bell icon as we are posting these plant rants every week. We'll see you guys next time.